since you're an author of horror novels, you probably expect this question, but what's been your most frightening personal experience ever?
Yeah, I see. I don't like that. There's no way anything frightening can happen to you when you're in the house all the time. You know, and you don't go out, and they don't let me out of here. And there's nothing. I've had not a scary life in any way. I've had no, aside from real personal things, that kind of thing. I have a phobia that my nephews just think is insane, but I can't. And to me, it leads to scary moments. And I cannot jump into water. I have to step into a swimming pool.
Really?
Yeah, I can't jump in. I've never been able to dive into anything. I've never been able to do water slides.
It's like bathtubs. Are you okay with that?
I'm pretty good with that. But it's a real phobia. And we have a swimming pool, and my nephews are always trying to they just think it's hilarious that this scary guy can't jump into a pool. He's so terrified of it.
That's great. So, we were talking before about when you were little, you used to listen to the scary radio shows, and you'd read Ray Bradbury. It was great. So why do you think that people like to be scared? Do you think there's a reason?
I think everyone likes a good scare, and I think everyone likes to be able to have these creepy adventures and face these monsters and face their fears when they know that they're safe at the same time.
Yeah.
And when kids read my books, they're going out and they're reading this horrible stuff, but they know they're safe in their own room. And they're sort of facing a lot of their real fears in these books, and knowing that it's okay.
Yeah.
And it's all going to turn out okay, and they're not in any real danger.
When you have a little kid that will write to you and say, "You gave me nightmares," how do you respond to something
I hate
like that?
You hate that? No, you don't want to give them nightmares. Luckily it doesn't happen that often. A woman wrote to me, it was like perfect. It was like advertising copy. She said, "I like your books because they give my kids shivers, but not nightmares."
Oh, that's good.
It was perfect, perfect line, which is really what I try to do. I don't really want to terrify kids.
Have you ever written something like really, like in your mind, like if you're like thought of an idea that's like really scary, and then like had to make it a little less frightening for the children?
Usually it's the opposite. Usually my editors are saying make it scarier, because I tend to be sort of pull back, and they're always saying, no, you have to hype this up, you got to make it scarier. Only once I wrote a Goosebumps book called The Girl Who Cried Monster, about a girl who discovers that her librarian is a monster, and no one believes her, because she's always making up stories. And the way that she realizes that the librarian's a monster is that she sees him eat a kid.
Oh.
And they thought that was a little too much. So, eating kids probably not a good idea.
It's all right, Fear Street.
Yeah.
Kill off
So I
the
actually changed it. It was better. I gave him a big tray of snails on his desk. And every once in a while he reaches over and he chews up a snail. That's right. Which is crunchier. Crunchier than a kid.
But do you ever put little autobiographical events in there anywhere?
Well, luckily, I was a very fearful child. I was afraid of a lot of things. And I can remember that feeling of panic about things. And I use that a lot. That's from real life, that feeling. I can remember that feeling of being a kid and being afraid of something. And the only other thing I use is, I grew up in this little suburb of Columbus. And I use that setting a lot. I remember what that was like, being out there, I've never written a book about New York City. It's sort of a superstition of mine. I've never had one take place here in the city. And they're all like suburban type, like from my childhood. That's real. But I've never used, and every once in a while there'll be like an incident or something that sparked that I'll use, but never any major kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was at an airport watching a family say goodbye to a little boy. He was flying by himself for the first time. And they were hugging him. The parents were totally nervous. He was fine. Right? He was going on. But they were nervous. And I saw the mother handed the boy a note. And then he went off on the plane. And I just watched the scene, and they're all crying. And I thought, what if the boy gets on the plane, and he opens the note, and it says, "We're not your parents."
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Great idea,
Yeah.
right? And I used that in the book.
Oh,
I mean, that was
good.
inspired by a real life
That's
thing.
so great how you can think of things like
I
that.
know, it just, you know, you can't really explain that.
Yeah.
It just happened.
That freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah. So good, I just used it in another book.
Oh, no.
This time she gets a letter from her mother who says, "I'm so," and she has no idea.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare room called Shadow Girl.
Uh-huh.
She doesn't know she's a superhero. And she gets this letter from her mother who says, "I'm so sorry we'll never see each other again. I hope you'll forgive me."
Ooh.
And she's like, "Well, wait a minute, what's going on?"
There's
It's the same idea.
She's a superhero?
Yeah, but she doesn't know it.
What kind of
She has no
superhero?
idea. She's Shadow Girl.
Oh, that's cool. Do you believe in ghosts at all?
No.
No? Okay, excellent. So you
No.
haven't seen any, no believing in ghosts?
No.
Good for
I
you.
don't believe in any of the stuff I write. None of it.
This makes
But
sleeping
my
easier.
friend had a friend who used to write horror novels for kids, who grew up in New Orleans, and said that she had a ghost in her house, and she saw him twice. He was a boy with like a silver aura around him, and she saw him in the kitchen twice. Maybe she's making it up. She is a horror writer,
Yes.
but she told me that was true. But no, I don't believe in any of this stuff.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic, like all the things, like I guess that's what like makes you such a good writer, like the whole thing, like you don't have any scary dreams, no like frightening experiences, like probably like, use up all the frightening stuff in your like in your
During
head.
the day, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very smart. I think that's true.
Vicky and
Ask
I
me
are
anything.
definitely both readers, and we've written fan mail. I've bothered Kurt Vonnegut so much.
Yes.
Now, we've heard that you have gotten thousands of fan letters a week sometimes.
Mhm.
Now, what is the weirdest fan mail you've received? One of the weirdest or funniest ones?
Well, I've gotten a lot of weird. Some of it is hilarious. Some of it is tragic. We've gotten horrible, sad letters too from kids. My favorite letter. Here, I think the weirdest one was from a girl early on who read one of my teen novels when I was doing YA stuff. And she said, "Dear R.L. Stine, I loved your book, The Babysitter. The same thing happened to me, only it was my uncle who tried to kill me. Keep up the good work. I really enjoy your books."
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was pretty strange.
That's terrible.
That's
That's kind of sad, too.
I do. Yeah, that was pretty scary.
Yeah.
I actually notified her teacher and said, "Is this for real? Maybe you should look into this."
Yeah.
Did you ever find
My
out
fa-
if she was?
No, I never heard back.
Oh.
That was a very strange letter. My favorite letter, my all-time favorite letter, was from a boy who wrote, "Dear R.L. Stine, I've read 40 of your books, and I think they're really boring." Isn't that perfect?
That's great. That should be saved and framed.
Oh,
That's
that's
excellent.
At one point, I was getting 2,000 letters a week.
Oh,
It was amazing. My mailman hated me. He was just one day he took a big canvas mail bag and just threw it in the apartment. Return the bag when you're finished. It was so much mail.
Oh wow! Did you answer
great.
it? Did you answer
Well, I
all
could.
your mail or?
In the early days, I could answer it. When it was 2,000, I always think every kid deserves an answer because it's hard for kids to write letters. It's
Yeah.
not easy. So make sure everyone gets an answer. I answer every piece of mail. And at one point, I had a staff of 5 people answering the mail.
Oh, that's great.
And I tried to read as much of it as I could, but it was just too overwhelming.
Yeah, it would be hard trying to write and answer mail.
Yes, it would be like
Same.
a full-time job.
Okay, well, obviously, like your books require a lot of imagination because you've written so many. I don't know anyone else who could do the same thing. But do you think, like, your opinion? Do you think people are born with imagination, or do you think they develop it through reading?
I don't really know. I think everyone has imagination, and I think it's just in what ways you develop it and what you're drawn to. At the same time, I mean, it's a very mysterious process. When I was 9 years old, 10 years old. I would listen. I mean, I was drawn to these scary programs, and I would listen to these radio shows, tales to keep you in suspense, and science fiction shows. And I mean, it appealed to me. You know, that you can't really explain. Why did I find that stuff so interesting when I was a kid? And I think now that, you know, I absorbed all those things and all the Ray Bradbury stories I read growing up, and that all stays with you. So does that mean you were born with that? Or does it mean that somehow you just developed your imagination by absorbing all this stuff? I don't really know.
Like, a lot of people have the opinion that, like, people lose their imagination as they get older. Well, obviously you're an exception, but like, why do you think that people believe that, or that it happens?
Well, you know, there are a lot of things you have to do in life, and I think most people don't have the luxury of sitting home and writing stories. They have to, you know, find other ways to earn a living, which might not demand as much imagination.
For all your stories, do you have like a whole bunch of ideas in your head already, or do you, when you like start to write a book, does it just all come then?
It's usually one at a time. Especially, it's gotten harder because I've written so many books.
Yeah.
And it's usually, I mean, I'm so lucky because every time I need a new idea every month. I need an idea a month because I do a book a month. And every time I need one, I get one. Usually from a title. I don't really have ideas in advance, but I get title ideas. And almost all my ideas come from thinking of a really good title and then seeing where the title leads. And so maybe I'll make a list of title ideas and then go back and try to come up with ideas. I think I work backwards from every other author. I think most authors get an idea for a story and then think of a title later.
Yeah, I always thought like the title was the hardest part.
Well, I do too. That's why I like to have it. You know, if I have a really good title, then I know I don't have to worry about it. And sometimes, this is true, I've had really good ideas for stories and I couldn't think of titles for them, so I threw out the idea.
Really?
Because I knew I'd never come up with a good title.
So, is there a reason that you do that? Do you think of the title?
It's just the way I work. It's just the way it works for me. You know, I'd be walking down the street. I was walking down, and I thought this title popped in my mind: Brain Juice. Brain Juice. And I thought, that's great. It turned out to be one of my favorite Goosebumps books. And you know, so I just had this title, and then you start to think about it. You say, well, what would happen if kids would drink brain juice? What would happen to them? Maybe they'd get really smart. Well, what would happen if they would get too smart? Maybe they'd get smarter and smarter, and they'd get so smart no one could stand them. And then it would. What if it would ruin their lives because they'd be too smart for everyone else, and they couldn't stay in school, and they'd lose all their friends. And that's how that, you know, then it developed, and then some aliens got in the picture. So that's how it like develops from the title. That just seems to work for me.
Yeah. Is it still a hard job to be a writer? Is it still tough sometimes?
It's never been hard for me. I mean, it's the only thing I do well. It's the only thing in life that's easy for me. This is why I do it so much. It's true. You can ask my wife. It's the only thing I'm competent at. So it hasn't been hard for me. And it's been, I mean, my career has been very easy. I came from Ohio, moved to New York to be a writer, and got magazine jobs right away and wrote for all these fan magazines and things. And then I worked at Scholastic for many years. I did educational magazines. And my goal in life was to have my own humor magazine, my own national, that's all I wanted, was to have my own Mad magazine. And I guess when I was 28 years old, I got it. And I did a funny magazine for kids for 10 years called Bananas. And that was my life's ambition. I reached it. I did it. And then Bananas folded. It wasn't popular anymore. And I came home to write. But I just figured I would coast for the rest. That was it. I'd already done what I wanted to do. I had no idea what was coming. I had no idea. So it's been very easy for me. It's been really exciting, and I feel very lucky.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Very lucky.
So do you think that the success of your books is one of your greatest surprises?
The success of Goosebumps was a total surprise to everybody.
Yeah.
it was, you can't ever plan on having that kind of a success. You know, I'm in the Guinness Book of World Records. You know, I'm the biggest selling children's author in history. To me, that's like amazing. Because, you know, I wrote for 20 years and nobody noticed. I wrote a long time and no one noticed at all.
Yeah, well, I remember, like, when I was a kid, like, I remember there just being a lot of horror books for adults, but I don't, like, other than Goosebumps, I didn't remember, like, seeing any. I think that
no
was,
one
like,
had done it.
And that no one, like, realized that kids like to read stuff like that, too.
I know, no one had tried it. In fact, they told me, I did Fear Street first. And when we started Fear Street, they said, well, you can't do horror as a series. No one is going to buy it. Before that, I was doing one scary book a year. Scholastic I did the babysitter books and some other ones. And they said, well, you can't do more than that. No one would buy a series of scary books. And especially for 8 to 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
No one had ever written that stuff for 8 to 12-year-olds. It was the first one. And Agatha Christie, someone once asked Agatha Christie, why do you think your books are so popular? And she said, I just stumbled onto something people wanted to read. And I think that's what happened with me.
Are there any types of jobs or internships that you would suggest a young person who really does want to be a writer?
Well, I would suggest that they try to get some kind of magazine or publishing job if they're around somewhere to do it. I mean, I have never had an agent. I've never needed one. So I came to New York and I started getting publishing jobs. I didn't stay home and send in manuscripts from 500 miles away. It's much, much harder. And what happened was I was working in a publishing company and I got to know a lot of editors just by working with them. Then they would go off on other jobs. They'd go to Random House, they'd go to Bantam, and then I would know someone at all these houses and I would have friends. And just by being there and by being in the business, I mean, it gave me a real head start to become a writer. So I would suggest that.
How did you start off there? How did you start with getting publishing jobs and things like that?
I just started answering ads, and I came to New York. I didn't know a single person in New York. And I started answering ads in the paper. And I got a job. My very first job was with a fan magazine, making up stories, making up interviews with the stars. And then I got another job with this woman did 6 movie magazines. And we would just come in and make up stories, make up interviews all day. It was very creative. And I learned to write really fast. You learn to write fast and you learn to make up stuff. It was very good. It was very good training. You think it's horrible, but it's very good training. And then I answered an ad and got a job working for Junior Scholastic magazine at Scholastic. And I ended up staying there for 16 years.
What about college? Did you major in writing?
I was an English major at Ohio State, and but I did, in my day, on campuses, there were humor magazines. Every college had a humor magazine, and that's all I was interested in. In 3 of my 4 years in college, I was the editor of the humor magazine. I never went to class. I just did this magazine.
Do you think that writing is
lonely?
Lonely?
Yeah. But I think what happens in schools is that the teachers present writing as something that has to be serious.
Yeah, they do.
That's the way it's taught, that it's serious, you have to be so careful about what words you select. And the things I hate these teachers, mainly authors, who come into schools and talk to kids and say, write from your heart, write what you know, and write from your heart. Every word must come from you. That's terrifying, right? That is terrifying to kids. And no one's going to write from your heart and write. And I've never written a word from my heart. Never. I've been writing for 30 years for kids.
And you sold most books.
Yeah, I've never written a single word from my heart. And I never write about what I know. Never. And I just think that makes writing sound too hard and makes it sound like work.
Do you have a set work schedule that you make for yourself?
Yeah, I do. I'm very disciplined. I mean, I am cut out for this. I start about 10 o'clock in the morning and I don't get up until I've done 15 or 20 pages. I just do that every day.
Do you edit yourself as you go along?
Yeah.
You know, cutting out the ideas and all that?
Yeah. Well, except I do, my secret is that I do a very complete outline of every book first.
Want me to turn it off, please?
Well,
Should I turn it off?
no, it's
Okay.
fine. This is good. I mean, no one would want to copy this. To do a chapter by chapter outline. In fact, I never wanted to do it, but my editors forced me to. A chapter by chapter outline of every single book with everything that's going to happen in the book. That's the real work part.
Yeah.
And it's got all the chapter endings. You know, every chapter has to end on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And it has all the action of the book. And so when I sit down to write, I know I don't have to think, really. I've done all the thinking, and I can just enjoy the writing. And most people hate that line.
Right.
And I hated it at first, mainly because my editors always made me revise the outline and revise the outline. And by the time I'd done 3 outlines, I'd be sick of the book.
Yeah.
You know. But now I can't work without one.
Is that the hardest part?
The outlining is. But, you know, whenever I talk to kids about writing, they always say, how do you know how to end something? I'm very good at starting out, but I never know how to end the piece. And so I always quit, because I know I'm not going to be able to end it. And I always tell them, well, I would do the ending first. I always I know the ending before I start to write. And that's how, and they say, what? You know, everyone's always surprised. But I usually do, when I'm outlining a book, think of the ending first.
What do you think is the biggest problem facing teenagers today?
Well, I think, to me, I mean, when I was a kid, we all had childhoods. It was a really nice thing. And you could be a kid for a while, and you didn't have to be sophisticated and cool. You could just be a kid. And you weren't exposed to so much stuff. And every sitcom on TV wasn't just about sex. No, they're only about sex. It's the only topic a sitcom can be about. There was other things, and so they let you be a child. And I think the biggest problem is growing up too fast and not being able to have fun and just be a kid, and having to be grown up too fast.
Yeah, sometimes what I see is that everyone has so much to do that they don't get to really enjoy anything anymore because there's so much.
It's true. And even in high school, I don't remember doing hours and hours of homework in high school. You'd given an hour at night, and then you'd go do something.
Yeah.
It's true. So it's much tougher. I think it's a very tough job to be a kid. I think it's a very hard job.
A lot of people recently are saying that scary books and scary movies and scary TV shows are a big reason for teen violence. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think they're totally wrong. And I think that, I think the books are really healthy. Mm-hmm. And I think they help kids deal with a lot of feelings that they have, of anger. I don't really think that mass killers read these books. And I've never heard of somebody reading a book and then running out and doing something horrible.
Yeah, that's what
I've just never heard of that happening. And I think violence on movies and television is a really good thing. I think it's very healthy. And I think it helps people get rid of those feelings. Everybody has these feelings, these pent-up feelings. And I think it's a very good release to be able to sit and watch it. And I think people who say, oh, kids are going to be influenced, just don't realize that kids are very smart. It's insulting to kids. And don't get me started on this, really. Whenever there's some horrible tragedy, then they start saying, who gets punished for these things? Kids. They say, well, let's keep the kids out of the movies. Let's make sure the kids don't get to go to these movies. Well, let's ban the lyrics. Let's censor the lyrics in their music. And let's give them a curfew. And every single solution is just a punishment for kids. Yeah. It's not a solution. There are a lot of people who don't like kids and don't like young people and really resent young people. And these are the people who are trying to solve these real serious problems by punishing kids.
Yeah, every teenager
Let's take away their video games.
Crazy.
Well, that's people. You know, there's a natural. People have these natural tendencies, and they shouldn't be repressed. My brother, they brought up my nephew. They didn't want any violence in the house. They didn't want any violence. He wasn't even allowed to watch the Muppets. They thought the Muppets were too violent. And my nephew, yes, can you imagine? And they would never allow him to have toy guns. There were just no guns, no toy guns. And one day he was visiting, and I gave him a slice of American cheese, and he bit it into the shape of a gun. He had to have a gun. He was obsessed. He wasn't allowed to have any. He was obsessed with guns. Obsessed. He took this American cheese, he turned it into a gun so he could play.
What did you say?
I thought it was funny. You know.
And I'm waiting to hear the end of the story. And now...
What?
And now...
He's doing 10 to 20 at Rikers. There's no end of the story. He's fine. Write to entertain yourself. Write to be entertaining. It should be fun. You know, you don't have to write serious literature. You don't have to be an artist to be a writer. I used to write, I've written G.I. Joe books. I've written coloring books. I wrote bubblegum cards. I wrote a series of bubblegum cards. I did Mighty Mouse coloring books, Bullwinkle and Rocky. I once did a series of books. There used to be these rubber balls called Mad Balls. They were real ugly rubber balls, and they had faces. I wrote a series of books about them. I always tell kids that you don't worry about being an artist. You should never think about that, and that you can entertain people with writing. That's what it's for.